Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Grants and Contracts. We're so excited to have you here today. My name is Lainey. I'm your co host.
And this is Abraham. Welcome back to another episode of Grants and Contract Podcast. We love hanging out with you. Every week we come to hang out so that we can talk about the wonderful world of grants and contracts. There's a lot of things going on, lots of opportunities out there, but there's also a lot of uncertainty going on with the new administration, with lots of policy changes and initiatives. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to navigate this space from a very unique perspective. So, Lainey, you want to introduce everybody what we're going to be talking about today?
Yes, so we are going to be talking about grant jargon and decoding it, simplifying the complex grant terminology.
So it's kind of like a foreign language then. Is that's what we're going to be talking about? Talking about the language of grant writing. In government contracting, we call it governese. So in the grant world, do we call it grantanese or something like that?
Yes, so I am actually going to leave the studio and come back in. I'm getting a really bad echo, and I don't know
Okay.
where it's coming from. So I'm going to come right back in.
Sure, that's fine. Well, while you're dealing with your technical issues, I'm going to go ahead and continue with what we're going to be talking about today. So, if you're joining us live, welcome back to another episode of the Grants and Government Contracting Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the jargon or decoding jargons in terms of the grant world. And in the government contracting world, they have their own suite of jargon as well. And in the grant world, they have their own language, their own world that's unique. And we're actually going to introduce to you about a federal regulation that requires or federal agencies and government agencies to use plain English or the vernacular that everybody can understand. So we're going to share a little bit about that regulation as well. It's been in existence since 2010, but a lot of federal agencies do not always use plain English when they're putting out grants or contracts. So we're going to be covering that a little bit as well. So Lainey, you're back. How's your technical issues? Everything coming along?
Yes, I figured it out. I was actually listening to us on YouTube. So that's where I was hearing it from. So it was lagging and I couldn't, I was hearing it lag. So but yes, I'm excited today. This is what I love is kind of grant jargon. It's almost like speaking another language. So we're gonna do that, kind of talk more of that today. We're gonna introduce a new segment today to add some funness and a little game to the podcast. And at the end of, if you stick around, I have a little treat for everyone that's joining us. It's a booklet that I've put together of some information of some different grant jargons. The parts of the grant and everything. So if you stick around, I'm gonna put that in the chat a little bit later on, and so you can get that as a takeaway today. So
Mm.
Abe, tell me, I know we're we're not traveling this week, so we're both joining from Georgia. Everybody put in the chat where you're joining us from. We love to see where everybody's coming from. But what have you been up to this week? Anything fun?
Yeah, I play in another Swish pickleball tournament, or not tournament, but another Swish event.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if some of you guys have played pickleball before, but I have to confess, I am completely addicted to government contracting and pickleball right now. And so I played in that mini Swish event. I got third place in that event. So it was fun. There was that there. These are just all rec players. That there's no one really that good there. So I said third place. That doesn't mean I'm really good. It just means that of all the bad players, I'm better than all the other bad players out there. So so it was fun though. It was very competitive, but it was still a lot of fun.
So when y'all play, do you put all of your paddles like in a line and you draw that way, or do you draw a different way?
There's an app called Swish, and
Oh, okay.
so you put everybody's name into the app, and you tell the app how many courts you have, and then the app will automatically randomly choose a partner for you. It will tell you which court you're gonna play on and which opponent you're gonna play, and so it just rotates. So 13 players just rotate amongst the three different courts, and you play 10 rounds, and so every round you have a new team partner, and you playing a different opponent. And so so this is more of a fun way of how you play.
Mhm.
Especially there's some players I've never met before, so this gives me a chance to get to know people and explore. So pickleball is fun. It's a new world, kind of like the grant world, the government contracting world. Anything new that you get into, there's a lot to learn.
There's
And
a lot
like
of jargon.
yes, I had to learn what an Ernie is. So if you're in the world of pickleball, I didn't know what an Ernie is, and Ernie is not necessarily spelled the traditional Ernie. It's ERNE, not ERNIE. I didn't know what an ATP is, and so I had to learn what ATP is around the post. so
In the
so every
kitchen.
world has its own jargon. Kind of
Yeah,
learn
and you
all
have to
this stuff.
learn the kitchen. I thought the kitchen was a place to cook, but in pickleball, it means it's something you cannot get into unless the ball bounces in it. So there's all this different jargon and everything. I have to ask you, Abe. So for those of you that don't know, me and Abe met 3 going on 4 years ago. Um, and how we met was my sister-in-law was moving into college, and Abe's son was moving into college. They were moving into the same college, right around the same. I guess like their dorm was kind of on the same like area. So we were moving in. It was moving day. Nobody knows anybody, and Abe started making small talk with my father-in-law. And so, and that's how we got introduced to the world of government contracting. I had been, in it. I wanted to get into it, and then he told us what he did, and of course, we had to come join along, take the class. So, Abe, I have to know how many people, you've been playing pickleball. Have you told people about government contracting? Are you having those conversations? Are you telling them what you do while you're dinking?
Yeah, I try not to bring up government contracting with everybody during pickleball because it's kind of like my time away from government contracting. But people will say, "Hey, so what do you do?" Or there's conversation that does come up, and I tell them, "Hey, you know what? The world of government contracting is amazing," and get a chance to share that journey with them. But yeah, so it does come up from time to time. But now I'm playing with the same circle of people in terms of a casual basis, and then every now and then I would do a Swish account or a Swish event, so I run into a lot of new people that way. So, but we're talking about jargon as it relates to pickleball, but really we're here. If you're just joining us, we're talking about decoding jargon for the grant world.
Hmm.
And I want to start off by sharing a little journey about learning uh, English, coming to America and learning English for the very first time. So we immigrated as refugees, escaping the communist regime from Laos. When we got here, didn't speak a single word of English, and we were about to land in Ohio. And so think about this: they're a indigenous tribe of people, never met the world before, and we were about to land in Ohio, and these three Lutheran churches sponsored us to come to the United States. So we're excited about coming to America, and we looked out the window, and we saw nothing but white sand everywhere. And we looked at each other. We said, "Goodness, we're farmers. We're indigenous. We live off the land. How will we survive in America?" And so we looked around, and then the interpreters that were there that was helping us to make our trek to America, they laughed at us, and they said, "What are you talking about?" We said, "Look out the window, from horizon to horizon. There's nothing but white sand everywhere." And they said, "Oh, that stuff, it's called snow." And we don't have a word for snow in my language, because as a people that live off the land, we only give words to things that we can see and touch. So for
Hmm.
us, we have no concept of what snow is. We have no word for that itself. So snow doesn't exist in our world. It doesn't exist as vocabulary to us. Uh, and so for many of you, if you're entering into the grant world or the contracting world, it's a whole different world in terms of a language, culture, and different things in that regard. And so if you're historically from the private sector and you're trying to get into the government world, whether it's federal grants or state grants or local grants or foundations, they have their own jargon as well. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about that there, how to decode the grant jargon out there. So with that, Lane, I'm going to turn it back to you so that you can really help us decode all this jargon in the grant world.
Yeah, so, it kind of does feel like stepping into another language. And sometimes it's hard to even when I first started grant writing, you see a word and maybe it means one thing in a certain situation, but in a grant situation, it means another thing. So, we're kind of here to demystify that, talk about some of these words, and just help you feel less overwhelmed. And then we also want, this to lead to crafting stronger applications because if you know exactly what they're asking for, you know exactly how they're asking for it and in what context they're asking for it, you're going to succeed way more than if you're kind of just going into it blind. So, Abe, I want to present this new segment. I think it's really fun to do. It's going to be just a speed round. So I'm going to give you a word, and you just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. So I'm going to start out a little. We'll kind of go all over, but then we're going to move into grant jargons and get into
Okay,
that.
sounds like fun. Let's do it.
So the first thing. So first word, pickleball.
Tennis, because I think it's
Okay.
the opposite.
RFP.
Complex.
Okay. LOI.
ROI.
GCA.
Training.
Um, Fiscal sponsor.
Needed.
Federal funding.
Federal funding. That's a hard one. Private sector.
Private sector. Okay. Last one. Statement of need.
PWS.
What does PWS stand for?
Performance work statement.
Okay. Okay, so if we lost you a little bit, we're gonna go through those. So RFP, that was well, pickleball was the first one. We've already been there. We love pickleball. If you play pickleball, put it in the chat. We love playing. Me and my husband play. Abe plays. Um, Maybe we'll have a GCA tournament and we can have some
Oh,
of our
yes.
viewers come. That would be so fun. But so RFP, it means request for proposal. So that is both a grant thing and that's a contracting side. A grant one, you might have a grant application. There's a lot of different words that can mean a lot of different things. RFP is mostly going to be on the federal side. But this is just a formal invitation for you to submit a proposal is what it is. But it could be called RFP. Um, Abe, do you have any, thing for RFPs that you would like to add for kind of on the contracting side or even the grant side?
Yeah, the most people think it's complex. It just means that you have to read through it and follow the
Mhm.
specific details that they're asking you to do. And I look at it this way: the best way I can equate this here is when the government asks you for something, whether it's on a grant or a contract opportunity, they say, "I want A, B, C."
Mhm.
And we, as a responder, have to tell the government, I will give you A, B, and C. So the RP or the application is half of it. And then the other half of it is the response. And whether it's application response or proposal response, it comes together and it binds into a contractual relationship with the government. And so in the government world, we call it government contracts. In the grant world, we call it receiving a grant award. With that there, and so writing a response is exactly what they asked for. Now, here's the big difference from my perspective. We tell them we're going to give them A, B, and C, and then we have to tell them how we're going to give it to them. why they should choose us, and who on our team makes us qualified to be responsible in terms of supporting what they're asking for. So we have to, they tell us what, we have to give them what, then we have to give them how, why, where, and all of the different reasons of why choose us over everybody else. So to me, that's a RFI or RFP. It's just giving them exactly what they want and adding all the other why, mainly why choose us, but how is important as well.
Yeah, and I've been working on I'm teaching another class tomorrow at the North Georgia Community Foundation. So if anybody is local to North Georgia, you should come out. But I've been kind of breaking this down of what this looks like. And some of my biggest tips are first, always following your grant guidelines. So I talk about that all the time, but following the instructions. And I know that sometimes you're like, that's so easy. Why do you say that? Well, we're not talking about a one-line instruction. Some of these federal opportunities, I just did. A few months back, I did a federal opportunity. It was 86 pages of instructions. So it's
Ooh,
way more than just this much instructions, you know? And would have been easy for me to say, I'm gonna skim it, but not read it. Well, if I would have done that, I wouldn't have known what they wanted, how they wanted that question answered, because everything that I needed was in those 86 pages. So yes, I had to go through it multiple times and even on submission, but they had it broken down very I mean, this is a program that's been going on for a long time, so I always say that there's a reason there's 86 pages to answer every single question you could have to teach you everything you need, and it got down to the very specifics where it showed you step by step how to submit. Well, when I went to the submittal program, if I wouldn't have had that, I would have no idea what to do. But it said, click this button, do this, do this. And so following the grant guidelines is so important and they're there for a reason. You know, it helps you to stand out, but it also helps you to not have to troubleshoot everything. Cause you know when you get in a new software and you don't know what you're doing and you're just clicking around. But then another thing that I like to do when I get and Abe actually taught me this on the proposal side is I pull up an Excel spreadsheet and I go through my, you know, 86 pages up to, I mean, when I was doing proposals, I was having 500 pages I'm looking for through. So way different, you know, it takes you a whole day just to look through this piece of information. And I was looking for shall, must, and those were the things that like I was making sure to put those in my Excel spreadsheet as like a checklist. So if it says the funder shall list all key personnel. Well, I know that I need to make a list of all key personnel, or I need to insert my resume. I need to have a budget justification, you know, whatever needs to be done. So then when you get done reading, you're not going to remember all that, but you have a spreadsheet where you've copied and pasted where it has your 20 steps. So I think that's something that's very valuable when you're looking at these v- very complex documents.
hmm. Yeah. So, in terms of your experiences with grant jargon, what would you say are the specific jargon that confuses people the most? Maybe one or two that you feel like this is super confusing to people. Uh, like, let me give you an example. Right, when I was learning English, uh, the word "buy" can be spelled in many different ways. Right, it has multiple meanings. Buy can be spelled with bi or by or
Mhm.
buy or BIE or BYE. So to me, learning English for the first time and trying to understand, okay, how do you spell one word? Like in my language, there's only one way to spell one word. If it
Mhm.
sounds like that, there's only one way to spell it. There's no multiple way of how to spell it. But in English, it's confusing. So in the grant world, are there different acronyms or different jargons or words that sometimes is confusing? So if you have to say, what are some of the most confusing words out there or jargon? What are some of those?
Yeah, this is kind of like an example that I'm gonna give is there, and there. So that, you know, that's the confusing words, and I feel like even Americans a lot of times are confused with there, and there. But two things that I've seen struggle with. And the good thing is in my experience, most of the time an application will say submit this, and then it has like a little description. So include this, this, and this. So it's explaining it for you. So you're not necessarily having to just remember these jargon words. But two things that I think are really confusing for a lot of people are executive summary slash abstract and organizational background. So
Mhm.
those are two different things, and they overlap a little bit, but that executive summary slash abstract is going, it's more of a brief summary of the project you're submitting. So it's not necessarily about your organization. You might have to put, and you also have to think about this. If this is the first thing they're asking for, it is okay to say, "Hi, we're the Government Contracting Association. We're located in Atlanta, Georgia." So, like, it's okay to kind of give some background information because they're going to read it how it's asked. So they're gonna read it to go through it. So you wanna you know, it's like a story. You wanna make sure you're telling the story, but the executive summary, you're not putting, you know, everything that your organization has done when you're founded, unless it's needed. Sometimes you do put founded in, um, 1985, this, and this, but it's very brief if you are saying that. And also, I think I remember how I remember the executive summary is, um, and they'll normally say this, but this could be the what's taken is if you are received this, maybe it's put on their website, or maybe it's put in a book where it says this was the project. So it's a highlight of the project. Um, you're kind of having your proposed solution, your problem, your proposed solution, and your expected outcomes. And you're just wanting it to be short. You want it to catch their attention because this is kind of like marketing material. If you get the grant, it's going to be marketing material for the funders to kind of show what they're doing. So it sometimes I see executive summary be confused with organizational background, which organizational background is what it sounds like. It's the background of your organization. So they might just ask for your funding, what who have you partnered with? They're going to ask different things, and like I said, I have never seen an application where they don't specifically explain what they want. So you don't just have to go in blind submitting an organization background, but it's going to be like your mission, your vision, your history. And history can be the history, maybe you started off small, you've evolved large. It can be a history of projects. Maybe had you completed this last summer and now this summer you're wanting to do this. Different histories look different for different organizations. Um, and this is also a place where you can put your key personnel. So, our executive director is a PhD, or we have this many PhD on staff, and different things like that. So the organizational background and the executive summary, they're confusing because they kind of are the same, but they're separate, and they're separate for a reason because a lot of times that executive summary is taken and put somewhere else. So you just want to remember that. And I think I think there's a lot of confusing things, but I think those are the two confusing things. And that's when I'm teaching classes. A lot of times I get questions, well, what's the difference between the executive summary and the organizational background?
Sure, I can see that. And usually the executive summary comes at the beginning, and then the organizational background can come later. Is that usually the structure, or sometimes you just kind of follow what they're asking and put it based upon what the layout of what the application is asking for?
So normally the executive summary will be first. And so that's why it might be good to include a small little bit about who you are, because it's the
Mhm,
first bit of information they're reading. Normally the first question is what's the organization name? So if you've already answered that, you don't really need to put that in the
mhm,
executive summary. Sometimes in my executive summary, I'll put like a explanation. For example, if GCA, if we had um, a program under us or something like that. Like I do an explanation there just to give context, but then that organizational background, it's going to come later. And it might come right under the executive summary. And then I've seen it come as like on the last page. So it's just kind of according to how they set it up. If you're doing, and this was another jargon, an LOI, which is a letter of intent. So sometimes instead of doing actual applications, your first contact to a foundation is a letter, 1 to 2 page letter that you write and submit. And so that could just say, they could just have an outline of what they want you to put in there. So there, it's not questions, you're formatting it. However, I always say that you should format the LOI how they say. So don't move stuff around. If they list it, you know, A, B, C, and D, do it A, B, C, and D. You don't necessarily have to put A, B, C, and D, but in your letter, make sure it flows the way that they asked. And I like to always, with doing LOIs, make sure it's bolded, kind of the section you're in. Expect, like, if they've asked for certain sections, which I've seen that they do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just your own free letter and you write it. But if they're asking for sections, bold those sections so that you know everything is asked for, and that if they want to go look for this section, it's very easy. They don't have to read the whole 2 pages.
Yeah, and that's true, for any type of writing that you do.
Hmm.
When there is a guide of how they want the information, they might call it section 1 is the cover letter, section 2 is the executive summary, section 3 is your organizational background, or organizational history. You give them the same layout as they ask for, so when the reviewer is reading it, they follow exactly what you're saying, because now you match requirement for requirement, instead of they have to skip around and look for different pages to try to find that there. So that has been very helpful in terms of being successful in terms of the grants that you guys are submitting for. And that's true for government contracting as well. If the statement of work and the layout, they ask you for 12 bullet points, or 12 points in terms of your font. They ask for Roman Times New Romans. They ask for Arial font, or whatever they're asking for. You give them exactly what they're asking for. I think you're still on mute, Lainey.
Sorry. But it's the whole thing of following those guidelines. They're there for a reason. And a lot of times I don't know if you've realized this, but I did not realize, like, why do they care about 12 point, or why do they care about double space? It's so that the reviewer can very easily and quickly say, these are not the same. You know, if somebody is in 14 and somebody is in 12, then those are not the same. So though, like 14, it might look longer, but the 12 actually has more meat in it. So that's why you want to make sure that you are doing what they say, because, and that's also an easy way. I've talked to a funder about this. They have a lot of applications that are coming. So it's an easy way to throw something out. They're looking for anything as a mark against you, because if you don't follow directions, if you're not in 12 point, if you don't submit on time, those simple things throw you out, because they've got to dwindle it down in some way. So
yeah, and I've used that technique in other areas outside of grant writing and proposal writing. Like, for example, if I'm looking to recruit somebody to bring on a potential new hire, I will ask them. I usually give them about 4 or 5 things to do. So first, I would say connect with me on LinkedIn, because I want to see what their social profile is like, right? And if they don't connect with me on LinkedIn, then that means they have no idea that as a professional, you got to have a social presence, especially if they're coming in as a marketing or sales related person and they have no LinkedIn presence. That's a little bit concerning. And so I would give them specific things to follow. Why? Because if I just put on Indeed, or if I just post a we're hiring position somewhere, I'm going to receive hundreds of applications. I don't want to read through hundreds of applications, because that's a waste of my time. So a way to weed out people is give them some very specific things to do. And I tell them, do these 4 things first and then send in your resume. So another thing I would ask them to do is shoot a 3-minute video, and they tell me who you are, why you think this position is a fit for you, and post it on YouTube, make it unlisted, and send me the YouTube link, because that's very specific. If they can follow those instructions, that means they're going to be able to follow my instructions if they're working for my organization. So those are some specific tricks that I've used. And in the grant world, responding to applications, they ask for the same thing. Part of because they want to weed out candidates, and they don't want to read 200 applications if they don't have to. And so that's why they put font size, they put number of pages, and they limit certain things so that they can narrow the scope of potential candidates as well.
Yeah. And I love that you do that. I know you've shared that with me about hiring, and exactly right. You're wanting someone the same way that grantors and funders are wanting someone that pays attention to detail and that listens to what they're saying, because a lot of times they're not saying these guidelines. We've got to get this through our head just to hear themselves talk, or because they want to put out an 85-page thing. There's a reason they're saying this. Maybe it's they've done it before. They've seen things in the past. There's a reason they're doing what they're doing. As hard as it is for us to understand, there's a reason for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, they're asking you, I've seen sometimes that applications, they want you to get on a certain software and do something. Maybe it's create a chart or create something. And that's because they need that for their grant reporting. So they know that if you are already able to do this on the front end, you'll be able to do it on the back end. You're just showing them that you are available for this funding and you're the correct person for it. So Abe, let's dive into a little bit about this act that we have found that I'm so intrigued in. I think this is so interesting. And kind of talk about it a little bit, what this looks like and what this means for us. I mean, because the act's already been passed. So it's currently in effect right now.
Sure. So and some of you may not be aware of it, but any organization that receives federal funding must provide the service or the money or the support to this recipient in a language that they can understand. But this is a little bit different from the language side of it. This is because most of us, we speak the vernacular, right? The plain English. So this is called the Plain English Act. And Lane is going to pull it up, or I can pull it up and share with everybody. It's called the Plain Writing Act, meaning that if a agency is going to put out a grant and they're going to say, we want you to do this, this, and this, and provide us this value back to the agency, they have to write it in a way that everyday Americans can understand, so that we can understand exactly what they're asking for and in plain English, so that we can give them what they're looking for. And so this has been an act that's been around since 2010. It was put into place under the Obama administration. And there's been a few evolution of it to make it even more real for all of us here. So it just means that if any federal agency is putting out, or even it flows to state, counties, and cities as well, because some of these SLED agencies, they also have received federal funding. So if you receive any federal funding, agencies that puts out any requirement, they have to use the plain language to make sure that we all understand that.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool. I was clicking on that. They did a guideline for plain language. It's 118 pages, so that's a little long. But to teach, they probably put this out to teach contractors what plain language means. But this could be something interesting for you to read, because it's going to help you to understand how they're formatting grants and proposals. But this is really interesting too, because I think that this is what me and Abe were talking about, is what does plain language mean? How did they decide this? But also, what is plain language? What I consider plain language might be different than what Abe considers plain language versus what you, our listeners, consider plain language.
Yeah, because that is confusing, right? Because, coming to America, I have limited English vocabulary. So maybe my perspective of plain language might be very different from somebody else who, is a scholar and they understand old English and they understand Shakespeare deeper than I'm able to understand Shakespeare. And I don't know, plain English, I think that's a little bit subjective. Do they define what plain English is for all of us?
I don't know. Let's go look at this. this download. I'm going to download it right quick. Let's see
And
if
I'm going
they
to put the link into the chat. So if you are trying to figure out where is the Plain Language Act, I put it into, it's a law. So it's not just a goal, it's a law that federal agencies must make anything that they put out in regular English so that we can all understand.
So it's interesting. They talk about words. So choosing your words carefully, being precise and concise. Tell your audience what to do.
Can you zoom in a little bit to like 150 so it's easier for our audience to follow us?
So they're talking about verbs, telling your audience what to do, and using the active voice. So it's really interesting. I'm surprised I didn't learn about this in school. So I was an English major, everyone, with a political science minor. So I learned a lot of stuff about this and looked at acts and stuff, because this was a really interesting act that would be interesting to teach. I was trying to see if they did an actual, what plain language was. Okay, so this is exactly what we were talking about, that using must and shall. So if you do Command F on your computer, it'll show up must or shall, it'll highlight it. But that's how the government is supposed to explain requirements, is using must and shall.
Because that's very clear, right? Because sometimes we see the word may, or we see the word that is a little bit ambiguous. Because if it's the grantee may do this here, is very different from the word shall. And these specific words have been challenged in courts before, that if the word says shall do this here, the court defines that you have to do it. Whereas the word may, the courts have discerned that the word may is optional. So if you're looking at an application and the grantor is saying you shall do this or you must do this here, that's documents or that's whatever they're asking for. You have to give that to them in terms of what they're asking for there.
Yeah, and so they actually kind of talk about that shall is a little bit of a, they said it's not used in everyday language. So instead they're moving from shall to must not, may, or should. So should is a recommendation, but in my opinion, I think that you should take all the recommendations. So if they say you should do something, do it. It's going to help you be better. Like I said, it's just a recommendation, but this is interesting to come here and kind of look at that.
Well, Lainey, I would challenge you on that a little bit. I would say not that you should. I would say you must take all the recommendations.
Yes, you must take a recommendation, because I think that sets you apart. If it's optional, always do the optional. Always go above and beyond. We're not saying give them more information, but if they give you an option to submit a photo, if they give you an option to submit resumes, do it. It's not required, but it makes it better. If they give you an option to put your website, put your website. So this is an example. So any oil or gas leasee who wishes to use timber for fuel and drilling operations shall file an application, therefore, with the officer who issued the lease. This sounds a lot more, this is telling you what to do. You must file an application to use the timber on your oil or gas lease for fuel. File the application with our office where you got your lease. So I think that's really interesting. I was going to see if we could.
That sounds like very plain to me there. Even, English is my second language, but that's, I can understand that there.
Yeah. You must do this. Go do it right now before we. So this is interesting too, which I think I've noticed this. And so it says that you should use contractions, which is, do not, don't, that they want contractions because they say that it's how people talk. So it's not, they want to write as you talk. So as you're talking out loud. And I've noticed that. So we in school learned that if you're doing anything official, so I try to not use contractions in my grant writing, but now I'm looking at this and maybe it doesn't harm us to use contractions. Because I've always been told that's not formal, you know, in papers and any type of articles or anything to not use contractions. But this is saying you should. So, well, it says wherever they sound natural. So don't just go put contractions in all your stuff. And then so it's talking about here with conciseness. So you don't want to use a lot of nouns. So an underground mine worker, developing procedures to protect the safety of workers in underground mines. So just trying to not be so descriptive with things is what they're wanting to do.
So why don't we do this here? Why don't you take where it says don't say? We're going to use AI to help us speak in plain language, right? So we're going to go through a quick AI exercise here. And so we're going to say where it says, take that example that don't say, leases and operators are responsible for restoring, or actually go back to one that actually has a full sentence. Use that one. Copy that and go to either any AI tool you want, ChatGPT or Perplexity on your screen. And we're going to do it impromptu. This is not scripted here. So this is live example of how to use AI to help you. If you are writing something and you want the backspace where available back to R, so that it's instead of a space in between.
Okay.
There. So that it connects back to the word R. There you go. And same thing for that as well. Yeah.
All right. What do we want to put our?
Okay. So the prompt would be take the following statement. Start the prompt with this here. You are a federal grantor, and you must follow the Plain Language Act of 2010. And then take the following statement and write it in plain English. And then at the very bottom, reference the link. Provided here. And then I think I put in the chat the link to the plain English, or you may have it up already. Reference the link. And then also, or use any other online reference to write this statement in plain English.
Yeah, and before we go, I just kind of want to point out, so Abe, I've told y'all, Abe's the one that taught me about AI. So I want to point out he's being very specific in what he wants. You know, he's not just saying, rewrite this for me. Use this, pretend, you know, you are a federal grantor and you must follow the Plain Language Act of 2010. He's being very specific, giving it links, feeding it what it needs, because AI can only be so good as the prompt you're giving it. You know, people talk about, oh, my AI writing's bad, or I knew that was AI because somebody wrote it. You're not doing good prompts. You know, we have to do good prompts.
Before you hit submit.
Oh, hold on.
That's fine. That's fine. It would know. Okay. Put in there, be sure to use the active voice, because that's what they're asking, right? Okay. All right. Now let's see what it says.
So facilities and regional and district offices are available to the public during normal business hours for requesting copies of agency records. You can visit our regional and district offices during normal business hours to request copies of agency records, which I think that sounds a lot better.
Now, compared to the example that the plain English law gave us.
All right, let me get it
to see how closely related it is in terms of AI's version of plain English and the law's version of plain English.
All right, I got to get back to words because I had went off of it. Yeah, so it said if you are a private citizen, you can get copies of our records at any regional or district office. So it was a little bit different, but I think ours, you can visit our regional and district offices during normal business hours to request copies of agency records.
I think that's more plain than the law. Between what AI gave us, I think AI gave us a more plain language sentence. What do you think?
I think so too. And I think the only thing I would add to AI is putting in the normal, like putting in the business hours, because you want to be specific. So normal business hours can change. Some's 8 to 5, some's 9 to 5, some's 9 to 6. Some's closed at lunch. So putting in your, business hours. But I think it did really good.
Yeah.
And so how this can translate with your grant is we are never pro write the entire grant in AI. But if it's asking you to use certain things like this, help it reword you. One of my favorite ways to use AI, and this is what I say, I use AI every single day, but it's not for writing. It's for brainstorming or comparing and contrasting or helping me come up with ideas that maybe my brain is just a little bit overwhelmed today and I just need some list. And it comes up with a list I don't like. I say, give me more, give me more. And it helps my brain just start to flow because I'm getting those ideas. I'm getting that extra help. And that's with writing as well. If you're comparing and contrasting something, help me to compare and contrast. One of the ways I'm actually going to be teaching tomorrow. So if one of my classmates or students is on here, close your ears, or I guess you can be the star student, answer all my questions. But I'm going to be teaching about helping AI or using AI for comparing and contrasting your mission and your values with funders. So how are they the same? Because a lot of times they ask you to compare. They don't say contrast, compare your funding goals with the goals of the organization or of the foundation. And yes, we could sit here and we could write everything out, but we can easily go to AI and say, hey, how do you think these organizations are the same? How do you think these organizations are the same with this project versus this project that they're doing? What are some differences they have, or what are some similarities they have? And then I always say, what are some differences that they have? And the reason I do that, I'm not putting that in my writing, but so that I know these are kind of the gaps in what funding I'm looking for versus what they're looking for. So I can almost appeal to the gaps without saying, I know I don't meet all the criteria, but I can appeal in a way of maybe I meet in this certain way. So I want to kind of know all the information.
Yeah, well, hey, if I wasn't tied up in other events, I would love to come and see you do that class on AI and some more grant writing classes that you do. So if you are in the I think that's an in-person event. So if you are in the Metro Atlanta area and you want to attend that event for tomorrow, we could put the link into the description area, into the description comment area, so that you can join us for join Lainey at the event at the North Georgia Community Foundation. For some of you who are joining us live, thank you for always joining us live. If you're watching this on replay, all of the comments and all the things that we references are in the description area and in the chat area, so you can review that as well. With that there, Lainey, any other jargon you want to decipher before we wrap up? And then we got some goodies to give out to everybody who's joining us. If you are joining us on replay, the goodie link will be available to you as well. So we always appreciate everybody, whether it's live or on replay.
Yeah, so I think the last one is the idea of program versus organization budget. And I think this is something that stumps a lot of people. And that's a whole class for another day. You know, we could do an entire class on creating a budget, what certain budget items are, how to do a budget justification. So I can't go super deep into a budget. It's very intense. And also, I'm not a CPA, so get a nonprofit CPA. But I say all that to say, when a grant asks for an organization budget, they're wanting your entire yearly budget. So even if you just have one program, your organization budget is just that one program, but it has all your staff, so your rent, everything that you could have for the entire organization. It has your events, your galas, your gala expenses, your mail outs, everything. If it is just asking for a program budget, that means what that specific program is. And this is a question I always get, is the ED included in that program? If the ED touches the program, I say they're included for that percentage. You know, if this is 50% of their salary, then 50% of their salary is that program. But you have to decide that, once again, this is a whole nother class. So you have to decide that for your organization, what works best for your organization. But with that program, that's going to be anything that falls under that program. So if you are teaching kittens to drink water, you've got to put your kitten cost in there, your water bowl cost in there, the people that are teaching this, your facilities, anything for that program. They're not asking for your organization event program and everything else. I think people get confused on that, or maybe they don't realize that it's okay if you don't have a program budget, and when you're applying for that grant, to create that program budget, to go into Excel and create it. You know, that's not forging documents. That's just, you didn't have that document and you're creating it. That is okay. It is okay that sometimes they're asking for things that you don't necessarily have, and it has to be created. You probably have it in your mind, or you have it in your organization budget. It just has to be pulled out. So I think that's something that can be very confusing, and you just have to look at what they're asking for. And sometimes they ask for both. Sometimes they'll ask for an organization budget and a program budget. Sometimes they'll actually ask for your organization budget from last year and this year, so they can like compare and contrast. Did you go up? Did you go down? You know, what did your donations look like? So like I said, you're reading those guidelines, but even when it asks for organization budget, I would say 99% of the time it has a little excerpt in italics that says, please include 2023 and 2024, or please include your staff salaries in this, or whatever it's asking for, it will tell you. So just make sure you read that, create your checklist, and you are going to do great. We will work on some more classes. I think a budget class would be really good. I think Abe can give some great light on budgets. And I know that that's a huge question that people have, you know, how do I format this? What do I do? What do I add? What goes under what category? Because it's a lot. And it really, I would say this, unless they're giving you, and sometimes this does happen, they'll give you a template for a budget, which is great, because then you don't have to create your own. You know, you fill in the blanks and your budget's created. But you have to decipher and be creative for your organization, what that budget looks like, because every organization is different. Every organization has their certain funding, their certain expenses. So you kind of have to create that in your mind and what makes sense on paper for your organization. You know, we can give you a template, but not a one size fits all.
So when it comes to jargons, or what we're talking about here is grantees, learning this whole language of grants and this world here, if you get lost along the way, it's just like the real world. If I want to do business in South Korea or in Japan, and I don't speak the native language there, there's a few things. First, I have to study the language and learn it, and it takes 3, 4, 5 years for me to get acclimated with the language so that I can be efficient enough to go and do business in Japan. Or I can do what, Lainey? If it's going to take me 3 years to learn the language, what's my other option that can be instant?
Translator.
Yes, get an interpreter, right? Get a translator, and boom, I can go start doing business in Japan immediately. So that's the shortcut. And so for many of you, if you need an interpreter, Lainey is a great interpreter for you. She can help you navigate the space here. And so if you just reach out to her at the Government Contract Association, and Lainey, just reach out to us, info@govcontractors.org. And I think we could put that email in the chat as well. So reach out to us if you need an interpreter as it relates to the grant world and you need someone to help you decipher, or if it's going to take you too long. For many of you have the general information already, but if you need someone to dive deeper with you, we're here to help you as a resource to you. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about our upcoming class next week. And if you've been hanging out with us live, next week we have another class coming up, and we're going to talk about how to find opportunities like a boss. And we're talking about contract opportunities, and we might mix in a little bit their grant opportunities too. But we're going to talk about how to find opportunities like a boss. And what do I mean by that? We're going to teach you 3 type of opportunities: how to find past awards, how to find current opportunities, and how to find future opportunities. And the future opportunity, we call it forecast. So past, present, and future, we're going to teach you those 3 principles of type of opportunities. Why? Because if you know the past, you can predict the future, right? If you know that the government's been awarding this janitorial contract, it's a 5-year contract, and you know it's coming for renewal, you can start building the relationship, you can start preparing, you can start getting your paperwork, your technical writing, you can start getting everything ready in advance. So we're going to teach you some very important techniques in terms of how to source, how to find, how to search for opportunities using different tools, different software. And we're going to introduce to you a pipeline management software that will make all this so much easier for you. So join us next week, same time at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, or 10:30 East Central Time for many of you, or just join us on replay. And with that, any closing comments, Lainey, before we wrap up here?
Yes. So thank y'all for sticking around. If you're watching back live, send us an email at info@govcontractors.org. I've already put that in the chat, and send us an email and I'll get this glossary over to you. I'm about to drop the grant jargon glossary down in the chat. So this is going to be your glossary, your dictionary for some of those grant jargon things, just be able to learn more about what pieces they're wanting, what they mean when they say certain things. So I'm dropping that in the chat. And like I said, if you are watching back, send me an email. I would love to send it to you, and just so you can learn more. And we thank you for always joining us live, or if you watch us back. And remember, you are one grant away
and one contract away from all your goals, your organizational goals, whether you want to get a new staff member, whether you want to hire a new executive director. You are one grant, one contract away. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we will see you in another episode. Take care, buddy.